The serratus anterior is our last little bit to focus on getting this torso all blocked in terms of the primary muscles. And what we really need to be visible when we're working on this is mostly just the skeleton. But we do want to talk a little bit about the insertion and the origin, just so that we're crystal clear there. The insertion of the serratus anterior is largely going to be from the first rib down to the 9th rib. So we're talking 8th and 9th. First rib. And we're going to have a little bit of an arc. Let's do that again. The insertion is going to be along the inside of the scapula. So we're talking about the serratus anterior as it comes from the top of the scapula to the bottom of the scapula, down to all the ribs in between. There's one important thing we need to know, though, when we are thinking about the ultimate direction of each one of these guys, because we might at this point decide that what we really need to do is just start to evenly distribute all of this. But that's really not what's happening. What's happening is that there are really 3 distinct major areas that the insertions are kind of clumped around. So the first major area up here at the top with the first rib, it's going to be right there towards the top of the scapula, and this is above the spine of the scapula in that area that's tilting forward. The second is going to be for the second rib, so this is going to tilt up. The third, and this is where we get the distinctive finger pattern that we see underneath the armpit, is going to be a little bit further down. Really, it's going to be at least half the way down. So at this point, we are now going to start to reach upwards. And we're going to start to think about how these guys can now evenly space themselves. And that'll help us, because otherwise what I found is it's problematic to just get this correct angle. But remember that the primary parts of the serratus anterior that we're going to be concerned about are in this lower half. Also, the easiest way that I found to do them is individually. So let's go into, let's say, the deltoid. We're going to duplicate the deltoid, rename this the serratus anterior. We're going to drop into shadow box. Make sure the skeleton is visible, transparency is on, control, click and drag to clear the mask. Press control, get the mask rectangle, make sure you're in draw, and we just need a simple little cube. And we need 2 of them. Drop out of shadow box, press G, and there you go. Just so we're crystal clear with this, we can come in and say use trim front. Let's see if that worked on the other side. It did. And then say trim dynamic to get the other side. This doesn't have to be a thick muscle. Let's show our rib cage. Look at this from a top view, drag out an action line, use the move and the center white dot. And let's see which one we want to focus on. Let's put the first vertebrae in. The first rib cage, first rib. Move that up. And I like the size of this. I'm going to actually keep the size of this for down there. So I'm going to duplicate this already. Move the size up. Scale it, pressing Shift. Rotate it up a little bit. Move it back. And you can use move also to skew it. Symmetry's on, move brush is active, pull that in, and there we go. We've got our first piece of the Serratus Anterior puzzle. Move brush AccuCurve. Just going to move that back. Now we can duplicate this. Rotate this guy downwards. You can even move this down. Get this at the second point. Use move. Skew that up towards our second rib cage. Switch to draw, move brush is active, transparency is off. Let's turn that deltoid off as well. And we can just push that in. Move elastic is a good brush at this point, hopefully. And now let's duplicate this. Move it down to our third grouping, which is in the lower half. Use skew, bring that up to our third rib. Probably going to have to come in with move, elastic, or with the rotate, and just rotate that. AccuCurve is off. Press Alt. Just wrap that around the rib cage. I'm going to want to come in and wrap this guy around the rib cage as well. Okay. That's going to work out okay. We're going to adjust the shape of these guys. We're just schematically placing them all right now. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to duplicate this one. Transparency goes back on. Move brush is activated. And I don't have a lot of room here to get all the way down to the 9th rib, so 7, 8, and 9. So what I'm going to do right off the bat is actually just get that, that 9th rib established. Okay, let's select our original. We're going to move this guy up. And there he is. So now we want to just position him, touching the scapula. Gonna rotate that forward. Switch to draw, move, pull out the rounded rib cage. Okay, let's get a good look at this from the side. And we have literally the fourth, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ribs to traverse in this 1/2 section here. So I'm going to use rotate, and we've placed this roughly in the halfway point. Let's just hide the skeleton. That's roughly halfway. So that's going to be, let's say, the third head. The third rib, sorry. Rotate. 1, 2, 3. Duplicate. Move it down. Rotate it. Move it out. Okay, just continuing to duplicate. Let's take a look at our skeleton. Duplicate one more time. Move it on up. And we need one more. I'm going to Alt-click on this last one, and that automatically selects the subtool. Duplicate it. Move it down. Rotate it. Show my skeleton. Go to move, and I'm going to skew it by moving this last point. Gotta be careful though. It's also going to move the end point, so I'm going to need to come back in with the move brush and just bring it all in. Okay, let's just place our end points. And let's check this with the external oblique. We want to make sure that these guys are wrapping in and getting really close with each other. So either we need to move the external obliques or we need to move the serratus anterior. Let's check with our pectoral muscle. Let's check with our deltoid. Let's check with our lats. And the lats are really telling me that these serratus anterior muscles need to go farther forward. So I'm just going to move that forward. Alright, now when they're all roughly placed, it's time to start to merge them down together. We haven't divided any, so we're in good shape. Just going to merge down, hit OK, merge down, OK. Great. Check our poly frame. I like to make sure to press auto groups. That way each one of these is its own group. It's sometimes helpful to do that in symmetry, but I'm not going to sweat that for this. Let's show our skeleton, press G, drop out of that. And now we need to inflate these and just grow them. So inflate is the best brush for that. Try to inflate along the connectors, like where they connect with each other. That'll help us do less flattening later on. Okay, come into the move brush, AccuCurve is on. Let's get our external oblique connected. And let's give these guys, each one of these guys, a bit of an edge. Let's turn that external oblique off, actually. Trim dynamic, or M polish. M polish is actually working really well. Don't need to divide these to get too much of the shape. We just need to indicate them. And there's, as I mentioned before, a lot of fibrous tissue working its way through the body at this point. So let's turn the body off, and let's make sure that we're integrating the lats correctly. Lats. Select the white fill color, and looks like the trap needs that as well. Now that we're using red wax, we don't really need all that. Go into render and turn preview back on. So in case you missed what I did, I pressed render flat. External oblique, and now we can use move, AccuCurve, and we can just start to wend these guys together. Let me take my Serratus Anterior. I'm just going to move it in. Press Alt. Let go of Alt. There we go. And down there I need to press Alt. Let's go into our external oblique And I need to move these fingers to match all of this up. What you really want to do is get these lockstep. So where the fingers of the external oblique are cutting across, that's where the fingers for the serratus anterior, each one of them, are going to connect. And then ideally, this is happening along a rib cage. And there we go. Fit them in lockstep with each other. And I'd say we have this fairly well blocked in. A couple of things to be mindful of is you really do want these empty triangles. And we haven't really even begun to understand the muscles that are happening in here. And we're not going to spend any time on those right now. All the anatomy books that you get really show you the trapezius as the primary force. If you want to understand a little bit more, then look for the erector spinea muscles. And look for the columns that they create. But for now, I'm going to leave you with this trapezius and these main conceptual masses, and then we'll get in and apply these to our skin. In fact, let's take a quick preview of that skin. You can see a couple of needs to, say, inflate around the rib cage. And this all depends on us having the volume correct. I'm inflating along the hip area. I'm adding in the volume for the latissimus dorsi. Adding in some volume for the trapezius. Pulling the head back a bit. And let's divide, make sure it gets a little higher. And look for this line. Look for that triangle. Push in until you find these muscles and then pull out again. You can also use Z project. B for brush pop-up, Z for Z project. Press Alt to push in which case it'll shrink wrap to the muscle. You can then come in with inflate and just inflate that ever so slightly. Now, if your model starts to look too masculine, it's very likely that's what happened. What has happened is that the muscles are simply too large, and you need to go back and thin them out. Let's see how our model looks. Definitely gotten larger. Rib cage has gotten larger. That back is getting larger. Let me just smooth some of this out. I think that the latissimus dorsi in the back, the lats, those definitely need some thinking. And I might want to see how far I can actually push them in till they become rib cage. Not too far. So come in here and it looks like I really do have to add that in. Or I need to modify the shape of her rib cage. Okay, so we'll keep working at this, but for now, the goal is to get all of these torso muscles in place. If there's any questions, ask away, let me know, and we'll tackle it all one at a time. So good luck.